Good afternoon. Another hot day. So let's talk about feeding our trees, our tropical fruit trees. So in my case, I do feed my trees regularly in the sense that I feed them. I perform granular feeding, beginning of spring, middle of summer, and also now beginning of fall. Winter is really the only season that I don't feed the trees. And the reason for that is because of our cold, the crazy intense cold, the last thing you want your trees to do is fruit and grow in wintertime. You want to really kind of starve them just a bit during wintertime just because they are in no position to grow during wintertime. Because what happens is, like this Barbados cherry, okay? Because most tropical fruit trees are evergreen. They will grow even in wintertime if given the opportunity. What happens is, as this Barbados cherry grows, new leaves grow. Those new leaves foliage will essentially get freeze burned by the frost, and it's just not good for the tree. So, so winter time is really again the only time that I do not feed the trees. But beyond that, most of my trees, well, all my trees get regular feeding. So 3 times a year, basically, with granular feeding. So in addition to granular feeding, every once in a while, when I get the opportunity, I give the trees just a treat. Going back to just the natural method. So what I've got here is a good fish gut. Trees love this stuff. So I should rephrase. I'm not feeding the trees because I practice organic feeding, and in the context of organic feeding, that generally means I'm giving something to the trees. I'm feeding the trees with something that was alive at one point and is now no longer alive. That's what I mean by organic. Fish gut. Fishes were alive at one point. Now they're not. So I'm going to not feed the trees. I'm going to instead feed the soil microorganisms in the soil, which in turn break down the fish guts, the intense nutritious fish guts, down to the molecular level, which in turn makes it available for the trees to uptake the nutrients from. So I'm feeding the microorganisms, mostly bacteria, which in turn makes the nutrients available to the nearby trees. So every once in a while, that's what I do when given the opportunity. So as you can see here, and really, when it comes to just feeding the guts or putting the guts in the ground, is literally just like the name it says, is you're putting it in the ground and burying it, and then the bacteria and the microorganisms take care of the rest. I mean, look at this, the roots. I mean, going back to my previous video, look at the roots. It is not deep. It is really shallow. Looking at the roots, I'm gonna say it's probably either gonna be from the sugar apple here or even this red custard apple. But yeah, this is the roots. So I'm going to and check it out. This is again just mycorrhizal fungus that's breaking down the wood chip, which I've got a lot of them here. I mean, this is like generally within 6 months, this gets broken down to nutritious uh, sources for the trees. But going back to feeding of the gut to the bacteria, though, literally all I do is every once in a while stop by my ethnic grocery store, get some whole fishes and ask them to preserve the guts from the underside, and they won't mind. So here you go. The trees nearby here are gonna really appreciate this treat here. And luckily where I'm at, I don't have any critters, so I'm not concerned about raccoons or possums digging this guy up. So that's really it. Just gonna cover it back up. That's it. All done. This is natural. I mean, this is when things die in nature, they get consumed by the bacteria, the fungus, and other stuff that consumes that decomposing body, and then it becomes nutrient for the nearby trees. So gonna bury it up. So that is it. So one emphasis on this method, okay? It is 101 right now. Only do this when it is above 85 degrees. As you can see, I'm sweating right now because it is hot, but only do this when it's above 85 degrees, because that's when the bacteria is most active, and you need the bacteria to break it down. So that's it. So now, just going back a bit here, feeding our trees. As you can see, so that's one method of feeding a tree. The other method, let me show you, is what I've just shown you earlier, and that was with mulch. As you can see, I mean, we're always constantly chopping down trees and branches and foliage, and what we do is we simply leave them here. This essentially will get broken down and becomes the nutrients from the foliage gets released back into the ground. Same with the fruits that we can't consume. This we will either just put in the ground and let the insects do the job of composting this for us, or I could just compost the whole thing. So now, wanted to talk really quick about, well, so there are some trees that don't need nitrogen. Nitrogen is really the main nutrient that most trees need. There are some trees that do not require nitrogen, such as the Inga above us. The Inga is nitrogen fixing in the sense that it's got a it's in the legume family. Most legume trees, with the exception of the tamarind, most legume trees have a special relationship at the root level with bacteria, which essentially bacteria provides, due to the special relationship with the bacteria, it's able to absorb nitrogen through that source, as opposed to via the fish or me providing nitrogen. So the Inga essentially does not need nitrogen, and in fact, as the leaves fall, this essentially becomes nitrogen for the nearby trees. So, well, before I do that, let me okay, so you know what, let me just focus on this really quick. See this right here? This is what's known as Mexican sunflower. This is really high in nitrogen. This is one of the few plants, along with the comfrey here, that I chop and drop. The main purpose of both of these trees, plants that I'm growing, is really to let them grow, so it mines the minerals and nutrients from down underneath us. And then as soon as I chop the branches and the foliage and leave them here like this, when they break down, the nutrient becomes available to the nearby trees. I mean, as you can see here, I mean, this is all chop and drop, and this is all Mexican sunflower branches. So as these break down, nitrogen then gets released to the nearby trees. I mean, same with the fruits, as you can see. So in many ways, my yard is constantly self-fertilizing just because of the recycled fruits and branches and foliage that gets dropped down to the ground. So this is the organic approach. Now, in addition to, well, let me just show you real quick. So this is what I really like. I mean, this particular granular fertilizer is what I normally use, just because this particular brand is specially formulated for acid-loving trees, such as, well, practically all tropical fruit trees, due to the inclusion of the elemental sulfur. So they already have elemental sulfur in this one. So this is what I use. Yeah, I mean, I normally just buy 2 bags every feeding. They're, I want to say, maybe $50 a bag. It's in a 50-pound bag. So that, and then occasionally for my container trees, I do on a monthly basis use liquid feeding. Put these into a 5-gallon bucket, mix it in with water, dump the whole thing in the container, and then the roots uptake the nutrient that way. So now I should mention the only times that I don't feed my trees nitrogen is when the trees are either fruiting or blooming. That's when I don't give them any nitrogen. Instead, I give them just potassium and phosphorus, just because as a tree is fruiting or flowering, you don't want it to grow. Instead, you want it to mostly focus its resources to fruit and flower production. So that's essentially the method I use. So depending on the state of that tree, I'm gonna either give it all 3 of these, or if it's fruiting and flowering, I eliminate the nitrogen and instead just go all in with potassium and phosphorus. So I'm gonna say something that's maybe controversial here again, just like my previous video where, you know, don't deep water your trees, and that would be compost. So in addition to all those, I also apply a generous amount of compost that I make myself to all my trees. Compost is not the same as feeding your trees. The nutrient level in the compost, the finished products, is just so small that it's really, you're not feeding the tree. You are, but you're not. The trees are not going to get fed or get enough nutrient from compost. So what the compost does is it feeds the organisms. It provides additional organisms to the trees, in turn, which makes your soil just really good. So compost is a soil conditioner. It's not, don't think of it as being providing nutrient to your trees. It is, but it's just so little that it's like, yeah, I really wouldn't even count that as being feeding your trees. So now there are some trees that I also just use chicken manure, just because chicken manure is like dirt cheap. I want to say the whole thing is like $3-4 compared to, you know, $50. Trees such as papaya, bananas, trees that are just heavy feeders, even guavas, and also citrus. I'll occasionally give them chicken manure, just because they need the additional boost. if you come here, well, because of the organic solution, I mean, this is really low in nutrient, but it is slow release. I'm feeding it 3 months, I mean, per season. But yeah, this is, it's 4 parts nitrogen, 3 parts phosphorus, and well, 4 parts potassium, and also it's got, magnesium and calcium, and of course the big one for me is the elemental sulfur, which is 5%. And also, it's got a bunch of beneficial bacteria, all the bacillus. This is the good stuff that you want in your ground. So, just going back to compost really quick. In addition to all the green, the foliage that I've got in there, in addition to all the food scrap that I've got in my compost bin, I also, for my brown, for the carbon piece of it, most of my carbon comes from these boxes, shipping boxes, and a special notice to you guys: shredded paper. Yeah, a number of my carbon in my compost bin comes from my shredded paper. Now notice this is only black and white. Most of it is black and white. I don't use anything that has color in it, just because the black ink, it's mostly soy based, so it's not nothing toxic. So dump the whole thing in, mix it in with the green, and becomes great compost. Also provides a good way for me to get rid of the shred bin. So these are the micronutrients. We're talking nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium. Depending on the state of your tree, on my tree, I also give them micronutrients when I see that the trees are deficient in it. Oftentimes, I've noticed this mostly in mangoes and also starfruits. They're oftentimes deficient in iron. If that's the case, I simply give them chelated iron, which is what this particular micronutrient has. So yeah, I mean that's really it. I mean you're feeding the ground. Just because my method is organic base, I'm feeding the ground, which in turn feeds the microorganisms, including the worms, which in turn uh, feeds the trees indirectly. So just like you and I, if your gut bacteria, your microbiome is happy inside of you, you're probably not going to get sick as much, and therefore your health level just goes way up if your microbiome is balanced. Same thing applies to trees. I mean, if the ground is nice and balanced, your trees are going to have no problem growing, even through the harshness of summer and winter. So yeah, anyhow, that's it. All right, have a good afternoon.